So Nishan asked about timing. It's a huge topic. Can't do it justice in 10 minutes. So I'm not going to try to. I will refer to the book that I wrote with Lauren Christensen about almost 20 years ago. I'm getting old. Timing in the Fighting Arts. The subtitle is a little bit misleading in my opinion, talking about ring sports and so on, which we don't really cover other than in theory. But that was a publisher decision back in the day. So anyway, that's not important. If you want to go in depth, I would recommend our book. I'll put a link in the description, and that covers a lot of ground. I'm not going to do that here. It's impossible. However, what I will point to is something that I think people often neglect to see as the larger context. In my opinion, timing is something that you should always view as a triangle, or three separate factors that turn into a whole system, or are combined together because they interact. And that's timing, distance, and orientation. How can you view that? Timing is literally time, how long something takes. Distance is the distance between point A and point B, or point A, B, and C, and D, and so on. So that's you and your opponent or opponents. And then orientation is spacing. How do you and your opponent relate to each other in space, in the literal space? Like I'm standing here, he is standing over there. How are we oriented toward each other? If you have two people facing each other, that is different orientation than one person facing off at an angle and the other person going straight at him. So time, distance, and space. That is the way that I like to explain it. Quickly going over them, and I'll explain at the end of the video why it's important to see them together. So timing is just like, when do you do something? There are many variables to this. It could be as simple as looking at the three basic timings, which is before, during, and after an attack. Let's say the guy throws a punch. You can hit him before he even gets started in that punch. That is often the most effective, but more difficult to do. Or unless you just strike preemptively, then he doesn't even get a chance to throw the punch. So that is typically the most effective, but harder to accomplish technically. During the attack is also a good bet if you can defend or deflect that incoming attack correctly. So he throws a punch and you punch at the same time. He misses, you do not. After is what we call the lowest form of timing. Why? Because his punch has finished, and that's when you do something. Why is it the lowest form of timing, or the least effective is not necessarily the word, but more maybe the most dangerous to you, is that if his punch is finished and you haven't done anything to him yet, well, he can just throw another punch. Maybe he can't complete it, but he at least has a shot at throwing another punch, which makes you vulnerable. Whereas the previous two timings, in principle, if you manage to be successful with your technique, he doesn't get another shot off. You actually land and he doesn't, and then you capitalize on your first technique succeeding to continue and until it's over. So that is a basic way of understanding timing. It's like, when do you do something? We can get to the more complex levels, then we're talking about strategies and tactics, and then it gets more to the why do you do it at that point. For instance, let's say that you are in a confrontation in the street and the guy is being aggressive. He swings a haymaker at you and you block it. Doesn't matter how. What do you do next? Well, you could go for this intricate joint lock. Not saying it can't work, but maybe it's a better idea to hit him first and then do it, as opposed to straight going for the lock. For a large part of the people, that will be the best strategy or the best tactic. However, if you are exceptionally good at joint locks, some people are, maybe you can pull that off. You don't need to soften the guy up and hit him first before you do the joint lock. So that is a different way of viewing timing. It's like, when do you do that, for what specific reason? And then there's so many factors involved. Next factor is distancing, is how far are you away from the guy, which will influence what you can do. And typically we break it down to things like out of range, critical range, medium range, close range, grappling, and so on. You distinguish between how far are you in relation to your opponent and what do you do there. So that influences when you do things as well, because the closer you get, the less time you have for visual cues to reach you in time and do something. So the further out you are, the more time you have, relatively speaking. We're still talking fractions of seconds, but relatively speaking. Once you get close enough to the guy, seeing is not fast enough. That's where we make contact and clinch, or make contact with his arms, upper body, and so on. So because at that distance, feeling, tactile feedback is quicker to react to than visual stimulus. So that is the strength of many grappling systems, is that as soon as they close in, they are used to reacting immediately to what they feel is happening, as opposed to having to watch like, well, what does he do? Is he shifting his weight left and right? No, you just feel it. So that is a critical component, is understanding the different ranges, as they will explain how you can do certain things at a certain point in time and whatnot. For instance, if I try to do a hip throw from all the way out there, trying to pull the guy into me so I can load him up to my hips and throw him, instead of closing the distance myself and then getting into the most advantageous position to do the hip throw, well, that is the difference between poor and good timing, is that I did the technique at the wrong time because I messed up the distance at which the technique is best or easiest to perform. And then we have orientation, and that is how do I relate to my opponent in the context of physical space. Like, where am I standing? How am I oriented? How is he oriented? What is he doing? What am I doing? And how are we going about that? Very simple. If I am looking straight forward, that's my 12 o'clock, and he is looking straight forward and I'm his 12 o'clock, and we're standing both at each other's 12 o'clock, that is not really an advantageous position for either one. Typically the first guy who makes a move here has an advantage. Not always, but often. If I can get out of his way, or manipulate him, or use footwork, or a bunch of other stuff, so that he is in my 12 o'clock, but I am in his 2 or 3 o'clock, meaning that I'm looking straight at him, but he has to look to the side to see me, so he's oriented, he's positioned in a different direction, I have the advantage. Because he's going to have a much harder time defending against me, because he can't really bring all his weapons to bear as well as I can, because I have all my weapons aimed at him and he does not. At best, he has one arm and one leg that he can bring to bear. The other one needs to turn. He needs to turn his body so he can put the rest of his body into play. It's not black or white. There are systems that actually focus on that, on dealing against attacks that are coming in from an angle, but that is by far not their preference. You don't typically want to be in that position. You want to have all your weapons and tools available immediately, as opposed to have to do something first. Another example of that would be is the sucker punch from behind. Why does it work? Well, the guy can't defend against it. If somebody hits you over the back of the head, even if you turn around and you look at them, and I turn around and look back and I see from this, in peripheral vision, I see somebody standing there and they punch, I don't have time to turn around and block or do anything about it. At best, I might be able to duck out of the way, but if he follows up, I can't really defend myself. Human beings are oriented to work forward, straight in front of them, or at best at an angle. And it is possible to work to the sides, but typically we are best suited at going straight forward and using techniques in that direction. Hitting backwards is something that you can do, but it's very low in effectiveness. So in the self-defense context and in many combat arts, you try to get a superior angle. You try to position yourself in a way that you can do whatever you want, but your opponent cannot. So that is all the three elements. So you have timing, you have distance, and you have orientations. So time, distance, and space. The best way to view them is as interactive. If you change one, the others will change at the same time. If I increase the distance between me and my opponent, my orientation can change in different ways than if I decrease the distance. The time it takes me to do certain things will also increase and decrease as I change, for instance, the distance. If I orient myself differently, I might be really close to the guy, where typically I wouldn't have, you would say, a lot of time to work because he's close to me. But because he can't really bring all his weapons to bear, I have more time to do things, relatively speaking. And if I can move faster than my opponent, then I can get away with being at maybe in a worse orientation than he is, at the wrong distance for whatever I want to do. But because I'm fast enough or faster than him, I can get away with it, and that is, my timing is better just because I move faster than him. So these are just a few examples of how these three factors interact. The point is that you need to see them as a whole, as a system of interactions that constantly change and you constantly adapt to. Well, that's it. I hope, Nishan, I hope this is helpful. Again, check out the book if you want more. I cannot summarize that in a 10-minute video. It doesn't make any sense. And as always, guys, like, share, subscribe, share this with people who might find this interesting. That helps out the channel and motivates me to make more videos. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye.